and turn it over to you, Tom, to welcome the group.
All right.
And then you'll be handing it off to Lori Collins of our team today.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'd like to start by welcoming everybody on the call, especially to some of our local workforce board members, chief elected officials, their representatives, and local support staff who are taking the time to attend all of these trainings today. I'm very excited to have you on. As a quick reminder, I'd like to ask everybody to place your microphones on mute, your phones on mute. That way it will help just to ease some of the excess noise from the calls and make sure that everybody can hear everything clearly. Once again, just want to express our appreciation to the Department of Labor, to Mayor and Mayor for the opportunity to give these trainings targeted and focused specifically for our local leaders. It's a huge help for us, and we greatly appreciate that. Last week on the call, we had the opportunity to take a look at the high-level overview of the roles of and responsibilities of the local elected officials and the local boards. One of the items that was listed as a joint board and CEO responsibility was the development of the Memorandum of Understanding and Infrastructure Funding Agreement. Everybody affectionately calls this the MOU IFA. And, we regularly work together with our partners in WIOA and the Arizona at Work system to take care of our employers, our job seekers, and make sure that they get the best services possible. The MOU IFA provides us the opportunity simply to document those services and describe how the costs of the services provided by the one-stop system and the operating costs are funded. It helps us to work cohesively, getting that, understanding that agreement together between the system partners, making sure that we utilize the funding in the best manner possible to support those individuals and the businesses. So today's training is going to dive deeper into the requirements of the MOU IFA, give guidance on how we can improve our collaboration and execution of these agreements. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Lori with Mayor and Mayor. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. So before we get started into content, we just have one housekeeping item that we do want to, we have to read this to you. It's just a recording notification. Many of you have asked if this will be recorded, and it absolutely is. Mayor and Mayor, an AIR company, allows for the recording of audio, visuals, participants, and other information sent, verbalized, or utilized during business-related meetings. By joining a meeting, you automatically consent to such recordings. Any participant who prefers to participate via audio only should disable their video camera so only their audio will be captured. Video and/or audio recordings of any mayor session shall not be transmitted to an external third party without mayor's permission. Next slide. So with that, let me just introduce us. As Tom said, we are from Mayor and Mayor, and we've had the good fortune of being with y'all in Arizona last week, this week, and then next week to do a series of trainings. My name is Lori Collins, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Michelle Sutton, and we're going to talk with you about all things MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, and IFA, Infrastructure Funding Agreement. Next slide. So as a bit of an agenda to guide our discussion today, we're going to go through the purpose and the benefit, just really some good basics of MOUs and IFAs. We're going to talk about strategies for the development of both of those documents. And then we're going to talk about the life cycle of an MOU and an IFA and what that means. And then a piece that I'm really excited about, there are two additional folks with us today who are your colleagues from other parts of the country who, as practitioners, are going to be here to share with you their approaches and how they have successfully developed effective MOUs and IFAs in their local areas. They'll be able to talk you all through that, and then they will be available for questions as well. And then we'll wrap up and talk about next steps. Next slide. Is there a question? I'm hearing some background. If you don't mind, if you would just mute your line, that would be really great. Thank you so much.
I don't even know. Apparently,
So, Lynn, if it's possible, can you go in and mute people?
Yes, I'll try to do that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So with that, we always like to have training objectives. The way we think about training objectives is that at the end of this training, what we hope you're able to say you accomplished with the training. We want to explore partnership development processes for the MOU and the IFA, but we also want to do that while talking about the requirements and also approaches for cost allocation. And then again, discuss the best practices, as I mentioned earlier, with the practitioner panel. Next slide.
I don't know what it is, so I don't know if it's something he actually legitimately thinks.
So I know we've all grown accustomed to a year of Zoom calls. So we've all grown accustomed to virtual meetings and such, but just wanted to let you know that if you all have questions, you are more than welcome to put those in the chat at any point. And then we've got, I think we've got one slide built in at a certain point during the session where we'll stop and be able to answer those questions, but we'll definitely, time permitting, be able to get to those at the end. So feel free to place questions and comments in the chat. And also as we're going, I'm sure if there's a question that one of the DES staff can answer or whatever via the chat, I know that they're more than happy to do that as well. Next slide. All right, so the place that we're going to start is talking about the purpose, the benefit, and the basics of the MOU and the IFA. So let's go on to the next slide. We know that a lot of you, if not all of you on the call today, have some background in the public workforce system and in the purpose and the why of an MOU and an IFA. But we do just want to spend a few minutes talking about what the law says about these things, sort of as a way to start us all off on the same foot for purposes of this conversation. So, as most of you probably know, as we talk about the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, there are 5 key or guiding principles that come out of the act. You see the 5 listed on the screen. But the 2 that we want to draw your attention to today, because we believe that they have the most relevance for purposes of the MOU and the IFA, are 1, integrated service delivery, and then the last one, accountability and transparency. So starting with integrated service delivery, if you've been around the workforce system for any amount of time, then you know that this is one of the basic philosophies or basic concepts of WIOA. The idea here is that a customer of the system doesn't care who's paying your paycheck whenever they go in to that Arizona at work location in order to access services. They just want assistance, and it doesn't matter to them who's giving it to them. And so that's the idea, is that there's no wrong door approach and that a customer can access services, and services are blended together and work together in such a way that it's entirely seamless for that customer. We believe and want to talk with you today about how the MOU and the IFA help you achieve integrated service delivery. It's real easy to fall into the trap of thinking the MOU and IFA are just technicalities of the law that you have to do, and so let's do them and put them over here on the shelf. When done properly, they are both tools in your tool belt to achieve these key principles. And then real quickly, the last one there of accountability and transparency. You know, the local workforce board, we talk a lot about the accountability and transparency of the partners of the workforce board and really putting services on paper and what each partner is going to do, and then also how each partner is going to contribute their proportionate share to the cost of the system. there's some built-in accountability and transparency with that, or there should be. And so again, the MOU and the IFA, when done and executed properly, are both tools to help a local workforce board, a set of local workforce partners, really achieve this guiding principle of accountability and transparency. Next slide. So just as a recap, we just want to talk real quickly about who are the partners in the system. WIOA references core partners and required partners, but they're all mandated to be a part of the system. So here are your core partners and the appropriate agencies in Arizona. So let's go to the next slide. And this is your list of other required partners. Now, let me also say that at the local level, you all may have additional programs that are in your system because the chief elected official and the local board have determined that there's another program or another partner or however many in your local area that's doing similar work and you want and need them to be a part of your local system. Absolutely. You want them in your system, you want them a part of the service provision. But these are just the ones that the law says are required. And so today, throughout our discussion, whenever we talk about partners, we're talking about everyone on this list and everyone on the slide before. The law doesn't talk about some partners have a bigger role with an MOU, or some partners have to do this with the MOU, or some have to do this with the IFA. The law just talks about partners when it talks about the MOU and the IFA. And so that's how we're going to approach the conversation today as well. Next slide. So again, just to sort of level set the conversation, this comes out of the regulations as well. And these are the 5 roles or responsibilities of partners in the system, be it a core partner or a required partner. These are the responsibilities. 1, you must provide access to your programs through the one-stop system. 2, you have to use your program funds to provide career services and maintain the one-stop system and jointly fund it. So that's right there. Those 2 things are where we're going to touch on the MOU relative to number 1 and the IFA relative to number 2. Number 3, sign the MOU with the local board. Participate in the operation of the system. So be an active partner in the system. And then 5, provide representation on the board if required or on committees if asked. Next slide. So the Memorandum of Understanding, what is it? It's the agreement which outlines the operation of the one-stop delivery system, and it identifies the role each partner will play. One way to think about it is, if you all have been around the workforce system for a while, you know that the local boards need to develop local plans. Well, and we do those local plans every 4 years. Well, if you think about the local plan as more strategic in nature, you can think about the MOU as the operational arm of that strategic plan. The local plan talks about the how and talks about the what, and the MOU really gets to the how. How are partners going to work together? What services are partners going to provide? How are they going to provide those? How are partners going to fulfill all of those requirements on that previous slide? All of that should be included in the MOU, and the IFA is a part of the MOU. So next slide. So while we often talk about the MOU and IFA as 2 separate documents, the truth is the IFA is a part of the MOU. And if you begin building the MOU first, you're building the IFA as you start that. The IFA is heavily dependent upon information that you identify around partners and services and locations. All of that is important for the MOU, but it also carries through to the IFA. So these two documents are companion pieces, and they rely heavily on each other. Next slide. And so with that, the infrastructure funding agreement it's a financial plan. It talks about how the partners are going to fund the services and operating costs of the one-stop delivery system. So if you go back to that second requirement or responsibility on that list of 5 responsibilities that partners have, this is where that one aligns. Joint funding is an essential foundation for integrated service delivery. And the IFA is really the opportunity where local areas and local partners truly put their money where their mouth is when they are talking about service integration and the delivery of effective services for their customers. But to get to an IFA, it requires active participation, and it requires everybody to come to the table in good faith and with the desire and the willingness to work together to accomplish hard things. When you're talking about money, those are hard conversations, be it our personal budgets or in our work world. When we talk about money and the money that we have oversight of, we kind of want to shy away from those conversations. I think that that's human nature. So it's expected that an IFA discussion isn't going to be the simplest discussion you ever have in the workforce world. But when those are approached in good faith and from a position of truly partnering for the benefit of the customer, it's very possible, and you're going to hear from 2 practitioners today, it's very possible to have productive and effective conversations that lead to compliant and appropriate MOUs and IFAs. Next slide. And so from here, we were talking about the connection of the MOU to the IFA. And so I'm definitely not going to read all of this on the slide to you, but where we're going to focus our discussion today is the first 3 blue boxes a little bit, because we believe those represent the MOU side of things, capturing services, capturing partners, really identifying what's happening, where it's happening, how access is being given. The green boxes in the middle really begin to take that MOU information, build in the IFA components. And so our time with you today, we're going to focus on those 9, I believe it is, boxes. Next slide. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Michelle Sutton, who's going to walk you through the next little bit of discussion on the MOU and IFA. Michelle?
Thanks, Lori. Hello, everyone. My name's Michelle Sutton, and I am really excited to talk to you all today about the MOU and IFA portions of this presentation. Before I get started, I want to tell you a little reason why I'm excited about sharing and helping you learn about these areas of this section. It's because I have spent 30 years working on the fiscal side of many endeavors. My first 17 years, I spent auditing federal programs, federal funding, and looking at and in making sure things are in compliance and that rules and regulations are being followed. And so I always said I wasn't a gotcha auditor. I always thought that auditors were great resources and tools that could be used within a system to help make improvements. I always like to talk to individuals and agencies and cabinets about their programs, about their internal controls, about their processes. And from those discussions, we might identify some things that were weak or some things that were not the best that they could be. And so we developed findings. But again, it was working together, looking at a system, figuring out things to make it better. Then the other 13 years of my career, I thought since I had gained so much good experience and understanding all of that, that I thought I would go on the management side of accounting and being responsible for the day-to-day operations and the controlling of the processes and utilizing and managing federal programs and working with various partners. And I have to say that the management of funds and accountability and being transparent of those funds was a little more challenging, but maybe rewarding as well in working with various things and having to implement things and new laws and new regulations that came out. And so given that background, I am very excited today to talk to you a little bit about the process that Lori said on those green slides that we're going to be going through, just how to get started. So the next slide. This is very important slide. This shows that when collaboration and the development of an MOU and an IFA comes together, it's very important that a services subject matter expert and a fiscal subject matter expert partner and collaborate together to be able to help develop the best MOU and IFA possible, because those two or several individuals know the workings of all the programs, the services, the funding. It makes a great team. It's just a good idea to bring to the table these two individuals who have this knowledge. Next slide. When you look at the elements of an MOU, you can see just from these required elements that they relate to individuals who know about services, but then they also are required to have individuals who know about the fiscal aspect. So your services, referrals, access, duration, modification process, appeal process, and other contributions are key things that are needed in the MOU to help your process be documented, which is a very key point of the MOU and IFA, is documenting these. It will be captured in your MOU. And then your one-stop operating budget and your infrastructure funding agreement are the two things where your fiscal teammate and coworker will help better the process, because they can provide that information that is helpful to completing the MOU. Next slide. The key elements of an IFA, again, the WIOA laws and regulations did put a lot of this in place to help identify processes that will help everyone complete their MOU and IFA. And having these items identified, you know that you've got a time period of which it needs to be for duration. It can be different than an MOU, and that's because financial things or situations change, and your IFA may have to change periodically or be reviewed again. The IFA needs to have the operating costs and that budget included. It needs to identify the partners and the board and the CEOs, a description of the modification and the review. And again, these are elements that need to be in your IFA that are best documented, and so that you have those for any partner to review and be accountable to in the process. And the information and building consensus and getting to consensus, again, collaboration, coming together, having those individuals talk amongst themselves about the process. It's very important that all of that is documented in your IFA. Lynn, next slide,
Yeah,
please.
next slide. Sorry.
Thank you. Something to consider. If you've got, as Lori had said, it's very important that your MOU items and your IFA go hand in hand. If you cannot agree on some of your budget requirements, then maybe you've not agreed on your services. And this is very critical to ensure that you have a well-run one-stop career center, and that things are operating smoothly when everyone knows the services and how it's going to be funded. So very critical to ensure that everyone is in agreement or on these steps. So to get started, on the next slide, we're going to talk about the one-stop operating budget. This budget captures everything that is necessary for the delivery of those services in your local area. The law has utilized and broken down these costs in categories that are very important as we go through the next slides, and as you're working to develop your MOU and IFA, that they've made them understandable and clear of how they need to be accounted for. As I explained, you know, my background is in number crunching, in spreadsheets, in documentation of cost and how shared appropriately. And that's one of the great things I believe about the operating budget, is that's where everyone starts from. And so you will be identifying the costs for infrastructure and additional costs. And within those additional costs, it's two kinds: the career services and the shared services and shared costs that are related to the operating system. Those three categories are very important to how we're going to develop the MOU and the IFA going forward. Next slide. This is a visual, and again, the Teagle 1716 is a great resource for information and examples, and I utilized it a lot today in preparing to speak with you about this topic. It's a great tool and resource. This visual, I think, helps to see how the cost in the blue are broken down further. You've got your infrastructure cost and your additional cost, but both make up your one-stop operating cost. I cannot stress enough the importance of documenting this. And I see a spreadsheet. You know, you can develop it in a spreadsheet. I also know that Arizona and the Department of Employment, I believe Economic Services, if I've got that correct, has provided good tools and some templates to be able to assist in documenting various aspects, but include costs, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but when you look at it, infrastructure costs are more of your non-personnel cost, and your additional cost encompasses and is more of your personnel cost, and that's usually what is considered your career services, and those must be included. And then you've got may include shared operating cost and shared services. But from a comprehensive budget, it's very important to document all costs. Next slide.
Michelle, I think we are losing you a little bit.
Hello?
Yeah, your audio is going in and out.
All right, how bad was it? That's why I have to keep my everything off as much as possible.
You sound really.
Do I need to
good
repeat
right now.
anything?
No, I think if you'll just pick up with this slide, I think we're good.
Hello?
Michelle, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. Keep going.
Okay, I'm so sorry, everyone. The infrastructure costs, as I had shared, these are your non-personnel costs, your facilities, your utilities, your maintenance, your equipment, technology, local, some common identifiers being signage and things that you think about in operating your building. So it's more of the cost associated with the operations. Next slide. Next slide. Hello.
Michelle, we're having a connection issue. I'm going to pick up and go through a few of these slides. Why don't you disconnect and try joining again and see if that won't help? I think
Okay,
no, it's okay. These things happen and it's all good.
okay, thank you.
Thanks. So as Michelle was saying, and I believe she listed this, but here's some examples of what infrastructure costs would be. And I'm sure you all can see those. I see the comments that you could hear her, but when you could hear her, you could hear her fine, but the audio was cutting in and out, and she was talking, and there were times you couldn't hear her. Okay, we can go on to the next slide, Lynn. So thinking back to that graphic of there were infrastructure costs on one side and then additional costs on the other. Let's dig into additional costs just a little bit and talk about those. So this is where applicable career services, shared operating costs, and shared services would be captured. And again, it's important to capture all costs that go into the budget or the running of the one-stop center or system. Shared operating costs and shared services could include initial intake of customers and any costs associated with that, assessment of needs and basic skills. It can also include personnel costs associated with shared staff. So if you have a welcome desk person, or if you have common business or employer services staff that work across the partners but work for the system, they would fall into this category as well as common program services staff. Next slide. All right,
Lori,
Michelle, are you back?
I am back. And again, I apologize. I've turned everything off that I can, but I will continue to go, and please let me know if I've.
Yes, ma'am. You are fine. Thank you. Glad you're back.
Well, I wanted to say too, this is the process that we're going to go through and develop in identifying our costs. And so on the previous slide that Lori was sharing with you, the guidance in a toolkit that is available talks about the 3 categories that we can classify cost in, being infrastructure cost, shared cost, and career services. Those are the categories that are suggested that we use when we identify the services and the costs in the budget. So we're going to develop that shared cost list. And that means that once you've put all of those items on your budget, you're going to go back and analyze, can any of those costs be shared amongst all the partners? And then you're going to take those line item and put them on the shared cost list. Then the next step, you're going to assign the benefit to that, and then you're going to assign the cost to that. So the next slide, we're going to walk through those steps just a little bit more in detail as far as how we're going to go about doing that. So the first step is just like I had said, we've created this list. In your one-stop operating budget, you have a list of all of the items that it takes that are necessary to run your system and your services in a career center. And so you've listed all of those out. And they can be infrastructure cost, career center services, and shared services. So you can see there, you're going to have that list, and then you're going to select which ones can partners share in. Next one. In the second step, you're going to identify how each of your programs can share and the benefit that you're getting in those costs. And this is very important to document the allowability and allocate how you're going to allocate the shared costs under the partner programs. Each partner program has laws and regulations and guidance that it must follow. And so it's very important that when you are working in your teams and as a group, that everyone understands the benefits that their programs have and can provide of the center. And so this is step 2, where you're going to identify that, and then you're going to know which of the programs and partners are benefiting from those costs and how that can be beneficial to the programs and be documented. So that's what you're going to do in step 2. In step 3, on the next slide, Lynn, you're going to develop the dollar value for these costs. And I think that's where Lori had talked about, again, you know, when it gets money associated with it, or when costs or dollar amounts are there, people seem have difficulty, and it's a hard discussion to have because there may be limited dollars, or there may be dollars that can only be used in a certain way. Well, that's where these steps are very important, to get all of that information on the one-stop operating budget and on the tools and documents that you're preparing so that you can develop your written IFA. It is very important that you come to the negotiation and the discussions with an transparent, you know, the accountability and the transparency. This is one of those key principal aspects that can be put in place right here as what can be identified as the dollars that partners and programs can contribute to the system. Very important to know your costs that are available to assist and help the system. Next slide. Next slide.
Michelle, do you want me to keep going?
Yes, I people are again having problems. See green service.
What slide
System
number
for-
should it be on?
We're right at the cost allocation, the first one ready for cost allocation.
Okay, it's there.
Okay, and so once you all have completed steps 1, 2, and 3, what you have in front of you then are your line item budgets. You have every one of those. You've identified which ones can be shared. You know the partners that are going to have and contribute to the services and the benefits that are received by each of those partners, and you've got a dollar amount. So the next process that needs to take place and that you're going to talk about is the process of cost allocation and how you go about allocating those costs proportionately to every partner in the system based on those benefits and operation outcomes that each partner can receive and provide to the system. In uniform guidance to CFR 200.4, there are some, again, steps and procedures and guidance that can be followed in how partners can go about selecting the methodologies, looking at allocation base, identifying the cost objective and pool of costs that you want to put together, calculating the proportionate use of the center, and just the relative benefits based on that. So again, this is a process of cost allocation that your physical subject matter expert can help you with and partner with you while you're developing those aspects of the MOU and IFA. So the next question on the next slide may be cost methodology. What is that going to do? And it's the negotiation of cost sharing and allocating among partners. It's a wonderful tool and resource in helping you document and allocate your costs so that the proportionate share of your funding is done for all partners in all programs. There is not a prescribed method that has to be used. WIOA did not do that. The uniform guidance does not do that. And so therefore it's discussion and conversations among all partners that help to develop the best cost methodology for each location or each center. And, you know, in a local system, there is different circumstances. Everything and everyone is unique and different. They bring different cost and funding to the table. So again, methodology is dependent upon the partners at the table and the cost identified in the one-stop operating budget. Next slide. How you go about determining your methodology. You use that one-stop budget again, and like I said, you've got the categories of your infrastructure cost and your shared cost and your additional or career services. But you look at each of those line items and you determine, how do I want to group those costs? What is the best way of identifying what those costs are and how we can share them across the partners? Some of the common cost items, you know, you can do it, like I said, by one line item, or you can group all of your infrastructure costs together, be it your utilities, be it your rent, be it telephone lines. You could lump them all together and make one cost, but again, that is dependent upon the conversations and the negotiations and the agreement among all partners receiving and providing their proportionate shares. Some of the common bases that can be used in those negotiations of methodology determinations: square footage, your FTE, you know, your participation enrollment, the numbers, the utilization. Those are just suggested and common bases that are used by the partners. Very important in the MOU portion of the IFA of the MOU portion is being consistent, applying the same cost and the group of costs across all partners who are located in that center and are utilizing the system for their services and providing services to customers. That is very important when possible, because of the reconciliation process that you will have when you perform those quarterly to help you identify if and when changes need to be made. So in methodology determinations, it is always important and a good practice to keep those simple where possible, not overcomplicated if it doesn't have to be, but more importantly, that all partners agree on the method used. Next slide. The partners, again, as I spoke about in determining those bases, this is where I say, you know, keep it simple, silly, you know, just make it as easy, but as accurate and proportionate as possible, because then you do have to go back and reconcile to that. You do have to go back and look to see if the cost actually incurred and the basis used was accurate for the cost that is being identified. Always you want to document the basis that was used, identify your rationale for choosing that one, and again, be consistent over time in the use of those bases. Next slide. Just some examples too of some of those cost bases. Your Teagle 1716 provides some very good examples of different ways in which cost pools and bases can be. You know, square footage is one, telephone lines and usage is one, number of computers. There can be a lot of different ways in which you can determine your allocation base. Two of the broad areas that they've identified is you can use inputs or outputs. And that's just a simple way of helping the discussions and the conversations occur to understand how you want to allocate your line item budget costs. So, you know, inputs are your staff time, your square footage, and outputs are how many participants were in there, how many people use this portion of the resource room. So just two different bases that can be considered when you're discussing how to allocate costs. Then we have now walked through the process where we've identified the cost. We've got that in our budget. We've identified the partners who have and will have benefits, who can share in that. We've identified dollar amounts to that. We've now created allocation bases. We've allocated the cost of the center and the system to each partner in there. And now it's time for the types of contributions to be identified and documented that each of those partners can have when they're paying their proportionate share to their costs for that center. Costs can be, or contributions can be made in the form of cash, non-cash, or third-party in kind. And so those are the three types of contributions that the regulations have identified can be used to fund the cost of the system by the partners. And it is very, again, I'm seeing spreadsheets. I'm seeing a very good way of documenting this information so that then you know if each partner, when they're paying their proportionate share, can contribute the cash or non-cash, or maybe even a partner has a third party that is willing to provide some in-kind contributions or services to the system. So those are the types, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about each one of those and how they can be utilized by the partners. Next slide. Non-cash contributions are, as they say, non-cash. You know, cash is cash. Cash is the funding that you can apply to your portion of the shares, be it through your federal funding or through applicable cash that has been received, but cash is what you can contribute. Non-cash could be contributions of goods or services by a partner that are used for the entire center. One of the examples that is most commonly used is that through the development process, through the cost allocation process, and through the final agreement of costs, one partner has to contribute to the center $15,000. Well, maybe that partner doesn't have cash of $15,000, but they have slightly used furniture that they could contribute to the system. Now, there's a lot of accounting and proper documentation and proper fair value recording that goes into all of that type of non-cash contribution. But let's just say that that value was determined to be $10,000. So for the contributions that that partner can make, they have made a non-cash contribution of $10,000. So now they're only looking at needing to potentially $5,000 of cash to fulfill their proportionate share of the contributions to the center. And again, one of the key aspects of contributions and documentation of those contributions is that the agreement of how those fair values or the values of certain contributions are made, and that you understand the source of where those dollar amounts and those values came from, and that the discussions and the collaboration happens when all of those items are being documented and put in your IFA. The next slide. Third party in kind are non-partner contributions. And these can be space, equipment, technology, services that support the, that support the infrastructure costs associated with the one-stop operations. They can be contributions given by a third party that go directly to the center itself, so that then all of the partners in there would have a reduction in their proportionate share because an outside third party has contributed to the cost of the center to help the center, and or contributions could be made by an outside third party non-partner directly to a partner. And then that partner can turn around and provide those same contributions to the center to help reduce or provide their portion of the proportionate sharing costs to the center. So third party in-kind contributions are a very valuable source of funding to help cover all costs within the center. Next slide. To wrap up, again, some of the most important pieces of the non-cash and the in-kind contributions is valuing those contributions, being consistent in those values, reconciling on a regular basis to know if they've been fairly evaluated, and all partners, regardless of the type, you have to reconcile on a monthly or quarterly basis. And I too look forward to our panelists who are going to talk about how they've incorporated everything that I just walked through today, but how they've gone about reconciling. Because while you've gone through all of that work to get all of that information documented and agreed upon and signed in your IFA, it is an ongoing, ever-changing, necessary to be reviewed and evaluated document that benefits the system. And so those are key aspects to keep in mind about the work that you're doing and the importance of how the IFA helps to build on the information and the terms in your MOU. Next slide. One of the resources that I found in looking at Arizona's information is your IFA review checklist, a very good document to help identify if you've got the right people at the table, if you've got all of your programs and partners, if you've identified your cost. It's just a great resource to have and available to utilize in this process. Again, the next slide, Lynn. This is resources that are available, good tools and information to help you answer any specific questions that you may have about the process of developing your MOU in your IFA. So I thank you for allowing me to speak on this topic. If there's any questions.
Well, Michelle, I want to address, we had a comment in the chat, and I know it wasn't necessarily in the form of a question, but we have used the terminology system and center interchangeably, and we probably shouldn't have done that. But let me address it this way. I've just been sitting here double checking the regulations and the Tegels and all of that to make sure that I'm correct. The MOU should reflect the services of the one-stop delivery system, and the IFA should reflect the way that the partners are paying are jointly funding the one-stop delivery system. I think in a lot of states, the system gets defined as the sum of the one-stop centers. And while that can be true, there could be other costs of the system that are shared that are not related to an actual bricks and mortar facility one-stop center cost. And so Joel, I'm glad that you flagged that, because that was, we should have caught that. But yes, the regulations and the Tegels do talk about the MOU of the system and the IFA of the system, and that can be more than a one-stop center. So thank you for that clarification. And then, the question about shared system costs for Title II, I'm actually going to, let's see if our practitioners discuss that. And then if not, we can circle back around to that at the end. Is that okay? And then there's a question, somebody from a COG has their hand raised, so you can unmute and ask your question if you'd like.
Hi, thank you and good afternoon. I have a few questions. This is Terry Drew. And one of the questions was, we're in a world of remote workers. And so are remote workers valued as an FTE as a cost comparison, similar to someone who's on site in a center?
I'm going to defer to the state agency staff on that one. I can't imagine, though, that the determination of a staff classification has changed because of the pandemic, but Rachel or Stacy or Nancy, would you all like to weigh in on that? How about we?
I had another question that's kind of related, if you want, while they're contemplating.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead with your next question.
And so the FTE comparison as a shared cost, how do you value that? Is it valued by their job title between system partners, or is it by salaries and fringe? Is it by the amount of hours that they contribute? Or is it just strictly, I have 5 FTEs and you have 5 FTEs and we're even?
Michelle, do you want to take that one?
I will provide one response and thought to that is keep it simple. Keep it simple, because the more that you put into developing something, the harder it becomes to reconcile and to account for going forward. So my first thought is an FTE would be based on just the presence in the location. So.
Okay, and that goes back to my remote question. So in the location, I think which was getting my attention. So.
And again, those people, I would believe, and again, I'm sure they'll follow up, but they're still providing services.
Right.
So their count, could, they're still working and providing services, and costs are still occurring for those people to be considered as part of an FTE.
Okay.
But each situation is different. And so there again, discussion among your partners in your location would be beneficial.
Okay, thank you.
So one thing to address and then we can move forward is and I think this is kind of what you were getting at with your question, is if partners have gone remotely, do we still share in the cost? And as Michelle was saying, there's still costs to operate your system. They may be lessened and they may be decreased, but if your budget was if your one-stop operating budget was written from the perspective of all costs that it takes to run the system, then there are costs still happening. And so, yes, partners are still required to share in that cost. However, you should have a review process or a modification or amendment process that allows for an adjustment on those contributions when the costs have changed. We know that this year has been crazy, and we're probably not totally out of the unusual situation that we're in, but the requirement to share costs across the partners is still there. That hasn't been rescinded or changed because of the pandemic. These are great questions, and Nancy Meaden from the state agency is saying that they're going to follow up on your first question there. So, Gabe, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Thank you for the opportunity. I think the question also raises the issue of consistency in rents and other costs that are not flexible. But it also raises the issue that if you modify your IFA, the state will require you to have all the signature process go through it again, which is a lengthy process, a burdensome and bulky process. So I think I'd be careful to try to amend it and leave it the way it is, realizing that pandemic is a once in a lifetime event, and leave it alone.
Fair enough. So noted. I appreciate that addition there. Well, thank you all for that. Let's go ahead to the next slide, Lynn, and then we're going to go through some things real quickly here, because I want to make sure that we leave enough time for the practitioner panel, because I really do believe that that's going to be really good content for you. You can go on to the next slide. We want to talk just a little bit about some strategies for doing this work, for doing this partnership development, and for working on these hard things with our partners. And so I just want to offer four areas of thought here. We're not going to point back to the regulations or a TGOL for this one. We're just going to talk about some best practices and some ways of thinking about approaching this work. So the first thing I want to talk about is the role of the board. And so we can go on to the next slide then. So thinking about the function of the local workforce development board, it is a part of that board's key responsibilities to convene partners, to develop the MOU and subsequently the IFA. And so while your local workforce board members who all have other full-time jobs, we get that, while no one expects them to be doing the day in and day out operational work of developing the MOU and the IFA, they really should be providing high-level oversight and guidance to all of the partners on the development of that. The local workforce development board is not only responsible for the adult dislocated worker and youth funding streams that come to the local area. They have responsibility for oversight of the system, and that includes all of the partners that make up the system. and not necessarily oversight of those partners, but they have oversight of the system and ensuring that the system is doing what it needs to do for the customers of the system. And I apologize, I just realized I didn't have my camera on. So the point here is go back to the function of the local board, and hopefully your local board has established some core values or a mission statement, or at least goals around the development of the MOU and the IFA that can really drive how they want to see their vision and the big picture that they've outlined operationalized and carried out in the local area. Next slide. And all we want to do here is talk about the benefits of the MOU. You know, going back to that very first discussion that we had about how the MOU is a tool to help ensure that you have integrated service delivery, the MOU truly is a benefit to the customers of your system, because it brings the parts together to do critical planning and coordination. And you're doing that for what? The ultimate benefit of your customers. So just thinking about keeping your customer at the heart of your decision making, and thinking about how the decisions around service delivery and collaboration truly have a benefit to those customers of the system. Next slide. So just to think about, to expand on that just a little bit more, you know, there are some key vision pieces of WIOA that we just wanted to share with you. And the MOU is an opportunity to, one, as I mentioned, focus on the customer, but also align programs and resources and partners and that sort of thing. And then as we were talking about that other principle, just to manage your programs, your service delivery effectively and efficiently, and then be accountable. And so this slide is just intended to sort of outline how pieces and parts of the MOU line up to those three larger buckets, if you will. Next slide. So one thing that I do want to talk to you about just real quick, and I know that I've got to hurry through this to give our practitioners ample time, but a philosophy that is utilized across a lot of industries is an approach called using human-centered design. And basically what human-centered design is, and I touched on it just a little bit ago, is making your decisions from the perspective of the customer that you're serving. Not making your decisions on agencies or funding streams, or this is how we've done it for 20 years, or I really like this person or don't like that person, but really what's in the best interest of the customer and what's going to move opportunity forward for the customer. And so using a human-centered or a customer-centered design approach to do that. And so customer-centered design or human-centered design has 5 steps. We've identified them here. There's a whole body of work available to you around human-centered design, and you would just go through these 5 steps with your partners to get you to that MOU, or get you to an effective service delivery model. Next slide. And so one of the questions that human-centered design, one of the approaches that it uses is asking how might we questions. And so I just wanted to pose this one here. How might a human-centered approach impact your MOU and IFA development process? And so I'll let you think on that another time, but just wanted to put that out there as an example of how to use that model. Next slide. Communication. As you begin the MOU and the IFA process, have a communication plan. Commit to over communicating and commit to documenting your decisions, and also ensuring that the right people are at the table to make the decisions. In some cases, you may have a person at the local level or regional level in Arizona who can truly speak to how services are delivered from their program or whatever, but perhaps that person isn't the right person to commit their agency to the MOU or the IFA. That's okay. There's room at the table for both the practitioner and the person who operationalizes the work, as well as the person in the leadership position who can sign the documents that commits the agency to that work. And so it's important to just have the right people at the table and to commit to communication throughout the entire process. And next slide. And then the last one. You know what? Sometimes when we talk about these things, we have conflict, and it's important. And we highly recommend that in your MOU that you have a conflict resolution plan or a dispute resolution plan. So what we find in our work across the country with various states is that often conflict arises when there's been a lack of communication. And when there's a lack of communication, people make assumptions from their own lens or their own perspective. So if you're communicating thoroughly, you're reducing, in most cases, the opportunity for conflict. But just be prepared and have a plan for how you're going to deal with it. And another thing, attempt to solve local issues locally. We all know that in the decision-making about the IFA, if local partners can't agree on how costs will be shared, then something called the state funding mechanism kicks in. And individuals other than you locally make the decision on how you will jointly fund the system. So that tells me that if I'm a local person, I really want to be in the position to make the decision locally about how those costs will be shared. And I am going to say we are running a little bit behind. I'm going to suggest that we, Lynn, skip over the next 2 slides and we just open it up real quick for any questions, and then we get into the practitioner panel. Does that feel okay to everybody? All right, Lynn gave me a thumbs up. So are there any questions? We can maybe take 1 or 2 right now, and then we'll turn it over to Lynn and Jennifer and Dawn. Gabe?
Thank you again. It seems to me that I raised the questions.
It's okay.
The last session that you had was very good also, and I thank you for that. But you had the regional administrator talking about locally driven system, transparency, not in these words, but removal of silos and customer focus. And I think you've touched on those points today. And in addition, you talked about partners, to collaborate, to be a team, and communicate. My comments are as follows. If you have a question of dealing, let's say, let me back up a little bit. Department of Labor wants to talk to the workforce board, state board, and the state board invites the administrative entity, the grant recipient for the state. In your opinion, is that a good practice to have communication and understanding?
Sorry, I was muted. I don't think that I understood your question. The U.S. Department of, in the example, the Department of Labor wants to have a conversation with the state workforce agency. Was that your question?
Staff, and staff then invites the grant recipient staff to be in the meeting. Is that a good?
Well, I mean,
or is that a decision that should be made locally at the state level?
for who should be in the meeting that the Department of Labor has called?
You know, this is Lynn. Lori, I would just say, I don't think we would know enough about this situation to be able to offer up an answer to that question. And it also doesn't sound like it necessarily is specific to the MOU and IFA.
Well, it relates to the issue of communication and collaboration and partnerships. And I think that if you eliminate from conversations your partners and others that you may want to have at the table to hear, it doesn't take away your decision making. It just allows people to learn or to hear and understand. And that's the point that I'm trying to make.
Or I'm going to agree with Lynn. I don't feel comfortable enough to make a decision on that, but I do think that there are times when the state agency is permitted and should have a conversation only with the entities with whom they have a contractual relationship with. I think that there are times that, based on the topic of conversation, it's perfectly fine that contractors of a grant subrecipient be in the room. But I don't think that it's a fair statement to say that it should always be okay for a contractor to be in the room when the state agency is speaking to a grant subrecipient. They have a contractual relationship with them, and they have a right to be able to get to talk to them about matters that they have. So,
And I thank you for that.
yeah, no problem.
I think we do need to move on to
Yes.
the
Take it
practitioner
away.
panel. Okay. I just want to make sure we have invited guests, and I want to make sure that they get the time that we've allocated for them. So thank you, Lori. My name is Lynn Bajorek. If you were on last week, you met me then. I'm a colleague with Lori and Michelle at Mayor. And it's my privilege to get to facilitate our practitioner panel today. As Lori mentioned up front, we have two folks who have done this work and really had successful execution of their MOUs and IFAs to the point where USDOL chose to highlight them in some case studies. That's how we became familiar with them. So I want them to be able to hear directly from you. Each of them are going to spend a few minutes talking about their local area and the process that they went through to develop their MOU and IFAs. And then we're going to open it up for questions. And so I'd love to have a robust conversation, love to have folks posing questions directly to our panelists and engaging with you directly. So I'm going to introduce Jennifer, our first panelist, and let her go through her slides. And then I'll introduce Dawn, our second panelist, and let her do the same. Jennifer Bain has been staff to the Northwest Tennessee Workforce Board for over 11 years. She began her career in workforce development. Sorry, I'm also controlling the slides. All right. She began her career in workforce development as a case manager at the American Job Center in Lake County, Tennessee. And she served as executive director of the Northwest Tennessee Workforce Board since October 2018. And the mission of that workforce board is to develop a quality workforce system to meet the needs of area employers and job seekers in the rural 9-county workforce development area. So with that, Jennifer, I will hand it off to you.
Thanks, Lynn, and good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate you letting me join you this afternoon. As Lynn said, we are a 9-county entirely rural area. The Northwest Tennessee Workforce Board is an incorporated 501c3 serving as the fiscal agent and the administrative entity for the board for the area. We do have a contracted one-stop operator and a separate contracted career service provider that provides both all of our adult dislocated worker and youth services. So we are typically a more at-risk population is who we're serving. We currently have 1 distressed county and 3 at-risk counties, so some of the poorest in the nation. One of our counties, our distressed county, I think has been 7th lowest in the entire nation. So we see a lot more challenges with educational attainment, labor force participation rates, higher poverty rates, and typically higher unemployment rates than most of the rest of the state. Our largest industry sectors, you can see there, healthcare, manufacturing, and transportation and logistics, just to give you an idea. And in our area, we have 2 comprehensive American Job Centers, and we've got 7 affiliate or specialized centers and 3 access points. So a total of 9 American Job Centers and a few access points that we're working on expanding. So our MOU IFA process, just to kind of give you an overview, the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development, their MOU and IFA policy, which is linked there, really sets the tone for the partners' involvement and who's required to be participants, and really outlines exactly what we should be including in our MOU and our IFA and how that process should work. And that's really evolved over the last several years as we've done this. I think this is our 5th year now. It's at the state level, those partnerships are being developed, and it's working its way down to the local levels. And really the expectation is clear across the board, and that helps at the local level to make sure we all are on the same page. So our MOU, which includes our IFA, is reviewed and signed annually by all those required partners that are present in our Logville area that we spoke about earlier. And our IFA template is based on the Workforce GPS template. If you're not familiar with it, it's a really long, massive document. We've got a tab that outlines all the infrastructure and additional costs by each of those 9 American Job Centers. It also includes our shared career services by staff, as well as estimated participant costs per program. And we are, it also outlines, budget line items and our allocation base. So we are using square footage and full-time equivalent for all of our American Job Centers. And all of the American Job Centers in our area are managed by the local board, with the exception of one American Job Center, which is in a state-owned building. So they do provide some of the costs up front and then bill to the other partners. But all of the rest of the costs in that American Job Center and all the other costs are billed by the board to the partners. And both centers are billing actual costs monthly. And then quarterly, each of what we consider our paying partners that you can see listed there review the IFA to see if any adjustments are needed to budget items or staffing, if any staffing changes are taking place that affect the FTE or the square footage. Those are worked into that. And then we have new signatures obtained from all of the partners, as well as our board chair and our CLEO. So some of the things that I think have helped us to be successful, and we're still learning and growing, and by no means have this perfected, but as I mentioned, the state policy and the partnerships that happen at the state level and work their way down, we do have some additional policies that the state has developed, the one-stop system design policy and their co-enrollment policy, that kind of further strengthen those partnerships and those shared goals. We also think co-location in itself is really the best foundation that you can have. Just being in the same center makes it that much easier to better communicate and better work together, just being there. But we do recognize and realize that that's not always feasible, especially like with our adult education partners. They've got a very limited budget. They can't be in all of our centers. So in our areas, they're actually in 2 of our centers, our comprehensive centers. They're not in our affiliates or specialized center. And then clear communication, making sure that everyone fully understands what's being changed, why it's being changed. And we really rely on our one-stop operator to help us make sure that we're aware of those changes. And she keeps the board informed so that we can provide that back to the partners. So these are a couple examples of how we go about making sure all the partners are clearly aware of all the changes that are taking place. So that top picture there is what we call a summary chart. It shows, you can see in that first red column, the 4/1/21 column, that's the new costs by partner. You can see the 1/1 cost for the previous quarter, and then you can see the change there. So that gives them a quick glance at an overview to see exactly total wise what their shared costs look like. If they're going up, if they're going down, they're staying the same. And then below that, they get a copy of this detailed spreadsheet that shows exactly what changes were made to the budget, so they know why their budget was affected. And I didn't fit it in the picture there, but below that, we also have a list of staffing changes that were made. So if one partner added a staff, removed a staff, they changed offices, so their square footage went up, all of that is listed out so they can see exactly what changes are being made in the IFA. And as I mentioned, we bill our partners monthly for actual costs. And I'm sorry, this picture is kind of small there, but to the far left, their budget items are all laid out. And then you can see the allocation base that we are using there. The annual budget's listed, as well as the previous expenses that have been billed per that line item, the current month's charges that are being billed, and it's got a cumulative year-to-date expenses on there. And then across the top, all the partners are listed out, and then their percentage based on the IFA is listed there, and they can see a breakdown of their charges per line item that's included in that monthly bill. The state bill is a little bit different looking, but it's basically the same process, but that's what we've been using. And I'm sure I forgot something. So if you have any questions, that's my contact information, and I will be glad to answer any questions that I can.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. That was excellent. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dawn and have her speak, and then I think we'll open it up for questions to both of you, if that sounds okay. All right, so let me move our slides forward and introduce Dawn Carber, who is the Chief Operating Officer for the Spokane Workforce Council. And she's responsible for ensuring the success of the council's community investments, including WIOA, serving as the Equal Opportunity Officer and coordinating the region's adult and youth American job centers and 20 affiliated sites, including a business one-stop and an Envision Center. And she's been in the workforce development industry for 20 years. So take it away, Dawn.
Thank you, Lynn. For the sake of time, I will share with everyone, we do things exactly the same way as Jennifer. So I'm not going to repeat anything that you heard. We true up on the same schedule. We use the exact same spreadsheet. It's like she and I work together to design our IFA and MOU. It's exactly the same. I will add, we love the MOU and IFA. I give this training quite a bit. Normally it's a couple hours. I'm going to do about 10 minutes or less for this group, but we have made the best possible out of the MOU and IFA. Michelle and Lori did such a great job talking about how you can use this document to pull partners together to make it about the customer. And that really is our largest focus. Lynn, you can go to the next slide. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to skip some things, sake of time here. So we have used the IFA and MOU to pull together our partners across our entire one-stop campus. Here's an image of our campus. We have our adult comprehensive one-stop center, which is called WorkSource in Spokane. We have an Envision Center, which is a social service resource center that provides access to housing, utility, food, clothing, an equity center, medical, behavioral, and mental health on site. We have a one-stop center for businesses. It's a talent solution center, and the Youth Employment and Education Center, as well as our board office located on the campus, and then 20 affiliated sites. So our MOU and IFA process, I feel you, it was not easy, but we still used it to pull all the partners together and to not only reach agreement, but really set a vision for how we wanted to not only fund the system, but work together as partners. I have two primary goals when I go into sort of the negotiation, if you will, for the MOU and IFA. I think it was Michelle that said it a couple times, keep it simple, that's number one. And number two is keep everyone happy. Keep everyone happy because I want it signed locally and I don't ever want to go to the state funding mechanism for any reason. We want to keep it local and keep everyone happy. You know, the next slide, Lynn. Our MOU, which of course is the narrative portion of the agreement, has two parts. The part that I actually like the best is listed second on there, the community compact. That's where we can pull together language about how anyone in our region works together to support workforce development. Doesn't mean they're paying into the IFA, but it's just an overall community compact and how we want to deliver workforce services. We've had a lot of partners step up and say they want to be a part of the community compact. They could see themselves in the language that we were talking about. So when we pull together a meeting, it is not a small meeting, and it's not just partners that are contributing financially. We really talk about the system as a whole and focus on the customer and what is the intent of workforce development. And then we get everyone excited, you know, to just start there, get everyone excited, and then we can drill down into some of the other things that are a bit more tedious and can cause conflict, but always keeping the customer at the center. I am trained in human-centered design and as a facilitator, and so we always use that line, how might we? And everything we do with MOU and IFA is how might we make this work for every single partner? We know that we need them all to sign it and we need them all to contribute. So how do we make it work best for them? And the MOU is just a standard MOU. It's on our website if anyone wants to look. It's just everything that's included in the law, outlines all the programs and services that need to be addressed. I am so proud to say every single partner signed it. We had no pushback. They signed it happily. We update it once a year, and at our last annual meeting, we pulled everyone together, and within 10 minutes, the group said, we don't even need to do anything. It's great as it is. Let's keep it going. So I'm so happy to report that. Next slide. Our IFA looks exactly like Jennifer, so you were able to get a look at that. I will touch here, though, I know there's been discussion on Title II. What we were able to do by using square foot and FTE is we broke it down just a little bit further. And so it's not only square foot and FTE, but also by a space that's used within a center. So we have a Title II partner that's located on our campus, and they just can't afford to contribute to the overall cost of the IFA as some of the other partners can. So we broke out just the classroom that they teach students in, and they contribute to the portion of the classroom that they teach in. I don't know if that would work for everyone, but our Title II partners are happy and they pay and they sign it. So for us, that was a win. The methodology is the same methodology that we heard from Jennifer. I will say, we're so lucky that our state is extremely flexible and lets us use whatever methodology works best for us. You can use there's a lot of flexibility, and you can use whatever methodology works, and it as long as it's consistent, but you can consistently break out different spaces within a center and have partners pay based on what they really can afford. So we were able to do that. We have 115 staff on our campus, 20 affiliated sites, and between 50 and 60 programs across the entire system, and every single agency is happy. So you really can do this. Next slide. For us, partnerships is everything. We find the win-win in every single conversation. I will go out to coffee, of course, pre-pandemic, but I would go out to coffee 10 times with one person if that's what it took to reach agreement. Anything we need to do to reach agreement, we will do. We do not take in kind, though. We report that as it's required, but there is a cost to operate in the system. There's a cost. We have to pay rent. So every single partner pays their appropriate and fair share in cash, and then we report everything else. For me, the number one takeaway is, and the secret sauce is, always strive for a solution. Make this a win-win for everyone. And I will go into any conversation being the person that has to cave first if I need to. And I think that's probably my last slide, Lynn. All right.
It is. That was excellent. Thank you. Thank you both, for sharing what you've undertaken and the process that's worked for you. I think that was really great. Before I open up for questions, Jennifer, I do also want to give you a chance to address that Title II question. Dawn, thank you for working that into your presentation. Jennifer, do you have thoughts as well around how to work with Title II on this, as I know it is a tricky situation?
We basically did the exact same thing that Dawn did. So we have a classroom, and within that classroom, adult ed has a desk essentially, and their dedicated space is based on that space, not the full classroom, because the full classroom is utilized by other partners as well.
Great. Okay. Very smart. I see we have someone with their hand raised. That it says NACOG, I believe someone from ACOG. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you, Lynn. This is Leah Sakavage in Yavapai County. Dawn and Jennifer, thank you for your presentations. It sounds like your processes have been very successful. Just the question of who are you working with? Are you working with state partner directors or local partner directors through this process?
Both for us.
We have a little bit of a mixture of both as well. It's typically, for the most part, it's really our local representatives that are in the negotiation meetings and participating in that. When we send out email communications, we do have a few partners that include the state representative, and one partner does have the state representative actually signing off on their agreement each year.
Exactly the same here.
Great, thank you.
All right, great question. What else? What other questions do you have for Jennifer and Dawn?
This is Lori. I'll ask a question that I've gotten here. What do you all do when one of the required partners is not present or available in your local area? How do you handle that?
We have not typically included them in our MOU. We do have one particular partner, our Native American program. They're centrally located and serve kind of the whole state. So they have still participated in our MOU process, but there are a few required partners that are not present in our local area and really don't service our area. So they've not participated in our MOU.
Dawn, I saw you shaking your head. Is it the same
We're
situation?
just the same, yeah.
We didn't even plan this like that.
I know, and you're 1,000 miles apart from one another
Yeah.
geographically, and it does kind of make you wonder, though, if there is what you said, Dawn, a secret sauce. Maybe there is certain aspects of an approach that are the best. You know, there's, yes, you have flexibility, and that's innate, you know, to your process, but there are certain key things that you're both doing, and you've achieved success with those things. So it's a theme.
And if it's okay, Lynn, I wanted to mention, it came up earlier about the FTE. Ours is calculated based on hours. So our adult ed is not their full-time presence. So their FTE percentage is based on the hours that they are there. So that does make a difference in their calculation as well.
Okay.
And as far as the pandemic and remote work, we had a period where basically no one was in the American Job Centers, but we really didn't make any changes to our IFA. The only changes that really were made by because of the pandemic are a couple of partners that had offsite locations in other places were not able to physically go there. And so they did actually add more staff to the American Job Centers and increase their cost a little bit. But other than that, we really did not make any changes because of the pandemic.
Exactly the same here. We did not plan this, I swear. There is, I will say, I've heard questions about how do you pay for a building that's closed? We didn't have anyone push back. There's a cost and everyone recognized that. There's a question about, do we include one-stop operator? And we do include 50% of the cost of our one-stop operator, but we've also designed that position so that it really does serve everyone. That person provides professional development and is available to coach across the entire system. They're designing a learning management system. So we make sure that they work on behalf of the entire system, not just center, but entire system, and then add in that cost as an other shared cost.
And that is included in ours as well. We actually have 100% of our one-stop operator contract in our IFA. I think it works out for the board share to be pretty close to about 50% of it anyways. And it is split between all 9 of the American Job Centers. And within our one-stop operator contract, we have shared welcome function staff at 6 of the American Job Centers, and that's all put through the IFA as an additional cost.
Great. Okay. You two can write a book, you know, after this.
Add that to the to-do list.
Right. Here's a question that says, why only 50% of the OSO costs are allocated? I guess that'd be for you, John.
Because I wanted to make everyone happy.
You caved first, right?
I always will if it comes to this. Yeah, I wanted to make everyone happy. And it was going to be $1,000 per FTE annually, and we were able to get it down to 500. And then I just found a way to pay for the other 50%.
Excellent. Okay. I think there might be others typing. You know, I have a question. What was the hardest? What was the hardest thing? Was there a certain cost that you couldn't get people to come around to? Was it, you know, trying to get some folks to co-locate? Although I'm guessing you had that in place prior to the MOU and IFA. But what was the hardest piece of this for your local area, and did that surprise you?
I would say really for us, the adult ed, trying to make sure we were staying in their budget, especially early on when it was still a really new process to us, and trying to figure out what we could do within the methodology to make it work for them. And that's still really a struggle. And other than that, I would say really just as we get new partners and staff turnover, making sure everyone fully understand what the IFA is, how it works, how one of the biggest things that we still encounter is one staff person change affects the budget of another partner program. And that's still something that we go over pretty frequently.
Great point.
The same Title II for us, they contribute overall the least amount of money, but it takes me by far the most amount of time to make sure that it's something they can afford and that they're happy and that everyone else is happy with what Title II is contributing. We talked there earlier, there was a question about how do you calculate staff costs. For us, we do 79,500 across the board. We just figured out that's what the average cost is for staff persons, all salaries included. And then when somebody, just like Jennifer talked about, if somebody only works part-time, we just divide that by half. And that's how we were able to get, and then of course, just the desk within a classroom, Title II, to be able to afford it.
Just one follow-up question on that Title II piece. I want to make sure I understand. So do you actually have Title II delivering any classes within the center, or they are? Okay. All right. That's helpful. I see another question in the chat says, so it sounds like your Title II partners are co-located. Here in Arizona, most of us are not. In an area like Maricopa County and City of Phoenix, we have 9 Title II partners. So that's a challenge. Are your Title II folks there full time, or are they on like an itinerant basis?
We actually have 2 separate providers. We have one provider that covers 2 of our counties and another provider that covers the other 7. They are part-time in all of our centers. Some of their staff are full-time, but they've got them covering multiple counties.
Okay. So if they're not in your center full-time, are they maintaining other sites in a separate office?
Yes, they're really good at finding free space. We need their secret sauce for how they get free space, but they're pretty good about finding some free space. In some places, it's just they've always been there, pre-stressing of co-location. So yes, they have a location at each county still. It just may not be the American Job Center.
Gotcha. And Dawn, is that same for you?
It is the same. An example though for us is we have 2 voc rehab partners. One of them has sufficient budget, one does not by any stretch. So we've had their Department of Services for the Blind in our state. We had to work very, very hard to find a way with them because they're not co-located here, but we were able to reach an agreement where they had to contributed a small amount, and they fully contribute to the other shared costs because they benefit from the one-stop operator. So that worked for them. So for us, it's just find something that works for everyone.
Excellent. Okay. Any other questions? I think, oh, I see one in. How many fiscal staff do you have to track all your IFA costs, calculate changes, etc.?
We have 1 fiscal staff person who definitely, this is not her full-time job. So it's a portion of her job.
How about you, Jennifer?
We have 1, and then me when she makes me.
Is it a situation where it's a heavy lift to get it done, but once you get it done, it's just upkeep and it's, manageable then with 1 person?
Yes, after that first year, really, and biggest adjustments we've made is we had a pretty big change in our one-stop operator contract after the first year. But after that initial period, it's just mostly those moving line items and a few minor staffing changes, and it's pretty easy upkeep from there.
It was the same here. I actually did most of the designing because the director just does not have time to do that as well. She does the maintenance, but I think I probably spent 3, 4, 5 months just doing this. And then after that, I've never really had to touch it too much again, pull partner meetings together, and it just pretty much runs smoothly.
That's really helpful, but that is, I think, something to note that you're an executive director and you pretty much worked full time on this for several months. Dawn, that just to me shows the significance and the importance of this as kind of a fundamental tool, as you said, right, for operating your system.
If this doesn't work for it in Spokane, if this doesn't work, nothing else is going to work. So this had to work.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay. See a comment in Pima County, the Title II adult partner staff are co-located at 2 centers. Probation partner staff are not co-located. Okay, so it sounds like you have a mix of co-location and non-co-located. All right, any final questions for Dawn or Jennifer? or we can call them Donifer. They have the same situation, the same IFA. No? All right. Well, I really want to thank you. And I want to let all the folks who are on this training know that Dawn and Jennifer they volunteered to do this after I reached out. And, even though we weren't able to offer them anything other than our appreciation. So I see you're getting some thank yous here in the chat box, but I really want to say thank you. This really is of tremendous value when you're able to share your experience and insight from other places. And we greatly appreciate the time that you put into this with us today. So thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move us on and wrap us up. All right, so we do have an evaluation again for today's training, and I am going to put it in the chat box here. So you have the live link. If you could take a minute to complete that, that would be wonderful. I want to let you know that the third and final training in this series is going to take place next Wednesday, April 28th at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, and that is going to cover conflict of interest, firewalls, and compliant one-stop operator procurement. So if you were on last week's session, I think you heard some introductory content around conflict of interest and firewalls. This one's going to dig deeper into that topic area and then also talk about procurement. So please join us for that. Here's your contact information for your state partners if you need to reach out and raise any questions. And I think you've already seen in the chat box that they do plan to send out the slides and the recording from this session at a later date. So stay tuned for that. I want to say thank you. We've all enjoyed our time with you today. Say thank you on behalf of Lori and Michelle as well. And I do want to turn it back over to our state partners at DES to see if you have any final questions or comments.
Not at this time, but we do appreciate everybody for joining the call today. And as was already stated, we have one more of these training calls scheduled for next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So if you have anyone that should be invited to that call and isn't yet on the calendar invitation, if you could let me know as soon as possible, we'll make sure that they get invited. And then as well, we are working with Mayor and Mayor to get copies of both the PowerPoint and the recording, because really there's a lot of content in the discussion that's of value. And so I want to make sure that you all have access to that as well. And so our goal is to, when the trainings are completed, we'll add this information to the technical assistance page of the DES website, and that will be shared with everyone. So you can refer to the materials, or maybe you can share with individuals who are not able to attend the training today. But otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us again on this call.
Thank you, Rachel. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.